Before we begin, I want to say that I'll be sharing opinions and observations for the sake of creating conversation rather than preaching a truth. My purpose is to find the questions that will help set us free in our own way. If something I say hits you that you like, great. And if something hits you that you don't like, even better. Sit with it, reflect on it, and seek your own truth. In a world where it takes courage to have a point of view, my aim is to create a grounded space to observe, reflect, and challenge respectfully. I started this podcast as a way to document the journey and as a living reflection point to my future children. My hope is that they'll be proud of a name that their father completely reshaped and gave new meaning. Powerful is the man or woman who can dance with their shadow and emerge with their heart wide open to the light. Welcome to the Connection Point Podcast, and I'm your host, Chris Delaney. Today on each episode of this podcast, I want to share with you an idea related to my obsession around a hypothesis when it comes to the consciousness of connection in life, business, and branding. It's this idea that the core of all human beings is a drive for connection, the being seen, heard, and understood, not for who we present, but for what and who we really are, and that's cut from the same collective fabric. I believe we can do this through sharing our humanity and the powerful stories embedded in each of our lives. Throughout each episode, we go through guiding intention. So this guided intention today is to explore an extremely powerful question that encompasses every area of our lives. And that question is a tough one. This question really is, are you willing to see things as they really are and face them? Better said, are you willing to be truly honest with yourself? This is going to really bring us to the core of what it means to be vulnerable. And I'll be exploring this idea for the next few episodes. We're going to have some fun today exploring some universal laws, things like the law of attraction. So many people tend to get so caught up in the ideas of toxic positivity and spiritual bypassing, and then talk about how we can all begin to truly embody the most connected and vulnerable parts of who and what we really are. So buckle up. We're about to go deep. And before we begin, as always, take a second and breathe into your intention in this very moment. Where's your attention going? Your energy flowing? And what does the experience of this day feel like when you put your head on the pillow? Just take a moment if you're listening live or recorded, and just simply think about that experience as you put your head down. Beautiful. Let's rock. So this episode is going to be really interesting. It's going to be less about kind of articulating in a polished way and kind of working with this idea. We ask questions within our community in the Intentional Connector Club on Clubhouse each week. And the question this week was, what does it look like for us to be honest with ourselves? How do we know we're being honest? And then the second question really was, is that different than us being able to tell the truth? And it becomes really subjective at times, but I think having these questions in mind are really, really interesting. Are you being honest with yourself? And how do you know you're being honest with yourself? There's this idea that there's the yourself. There's multiple parts of this relationship. And so what does that mean to actually have this relationship? So what we're really talking about is our relationship to our consciousness, our relationship to our identity, our relationship to all the things that make us what we think that we are. But what if who you think you are isn't what we all are? Like, what a cluster, right? And so what I like to do is kind of share some reflections and maybe create a foundation of how we can think through this. And then when we finish, what I want to do is not leave ourselves in the mess. I want us to leave ourselves with a sense of progress and also being able to understand what can we do with new information? As we learn, as we grow, how can we be honest with ourselves and do it in a way that's compassionate? And also, again, apply this back to our lives, our brands, and our businesses. With the thesis really being, again, that at the core of everything that we do is for connection. It's about building connection in those three areas. So let's kind of dive in a little bit, and I'll explain a few things. So I first want to dive into this idea of what universal laws are. And I get passionate about this because my marketing and my media brain goes into how much this has been sensationalized and commercialized over the last decade or so. And you can't stop it beyond social media, whether you're on Clubhouse, Instagram, YouTube, anywhere else, where people are literally selling you on the idea that there's some secret they're going to teach you, when these ideas have been around for centuries. They've been written about in the Bible. They've been written about in the Kabbalah. They've been all different traditions. And it seems as though we're all just catching up. But the interesting thing is, if you're like me, when I started to really study these things, it made total sense to me because I understood them, just not in the way that they were being explained to me. So let's talk about a few of these universal laws. And in reference, I always give a reference point. I'm speaking directly to Hermetic wisdom, right? There's a group of people that literally just hung out in caves, spent time away from society, as we all should sometimes, and sat with their thoughts, right? It's a totally new idea. They sat with their own thoughts and began to think through things. And this wisdom came to them. Now it's written about in what they call the Kybalion or Kabbalion, Kybalion. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. Every resource I ever have, we'll put in show notes so you guys can go check it out. And it's occult wisdom, right? So if you have a bias or that triggers you or whatever, then I encourage you to kind of dive into that. And it's just information, right? Take it with a grain of salt. And so there's a couple different universal laws, but there's a few that I think are going to be important to our discussion. One of the first laws is the laws of vibration. And that states that essentially we're vibrational beings. Every particle in the known universe vibrates. They're all moving, right? Electrons are all moving in different speeds, different rapid paces. So we're always vibrating. So when we talk about our vibration, we talk about the state of that vibration. It was also written about quite a bit in Power versus Force by Dr. Hawkins, which is a great book that talks about how different emotions, right? Energy and motion carry different frequencies, different vibrations. And so frequencies of anger, shame, and guilt will have a lower vibration, whereas an emotion, an emotional state such as gratitude and joy will have a much higher vibration. And the goal is to raise our vibration. If we raise our vibration, then our perception widens. We're able to see things differently. But let me bring it to you just super clear as I always do. Put it this way. When you feel like shit, everything looks like shit. When you feel amazing, everything feels amazing. I think it's the best way I can explain it in the way I needed to hear it. That makes total sense. Now, the interesting thing is, where does it all begin and end? It just is, right? Something can trigger the other back and forth. It's all about perception. So don't get caught up in the sauce. Don't get lost in the sauce, as I say. So law of vibration, we're vibrational. The second one is really interesting, which I love. It's called the law of correspondence. And the law of correspondence, many of you may have heard as above, so below, so within, so without. What you want to understand about this is that essentially our outer world is a reflection of our inner world and vice versa. And so plainly put, what I like about this is if you want to kind of get a glimpse into how you're doing internally in your inner world, your inner verse versus outside the universe, then you can start to see in your life and you can start to categorize it in the quality of your relationships, your finances, your health, your perception, your emotional experience. And so it's a great way for us to kind of get a glimpse of what that all looks like in relationship. So the law of correspondence is also going to be important here. The third one is the mother of all, right? This is the one that everybody says is the secret. This is the one that everybody lines up to go listen to somebody on a stage, tell them the same thing over and over again so that they can all feel good about themselves, which is the law of attraction. The law of attraction, right? We're always attracting things to us. But what does it really mean? Plainly put, the idea of the law of attraction is that, if we are vibrational, we are corresponding with all things, then we are attracting things in vibration match of what we are. And this means that we are experiencing matter in different ways, different particles of experiences. You might get inspiration. You might have new experiences. The interesting thing about this is that we begin to bastardize and commercialize this law so much to fit our own needs. Because here's the interesting part, is that we talk about the law of attraction when it comes to attracting a new lover. I just want a new lover, right? Or I want to make $1 million in 30 days, even though I've never had, made $10,000 a month or something like that. And we want magic, right? But the idea here is that the idea of manifestation for a second has nothing to do with like a massive event that just happens and something just, just immediately comes into being, like on Star Trek with those things where you had to go get a cup of coffee or something and just like materialize, which is pretty dope. But either way, it just shows up, right? But the idea of manifestation, law of attraction, is you get these ideas and all of a sudden you start meeting people that can provide resources, opportunities, ideas come together, and you begin to act on them. And so many people get caught up in the law of attraction. I want to talk about the law of attraction spiral in a second, which I think could be super detrimental to our experience of life, where we tend to get so caught up in the words that we're choosing and whether or not we're in a negative vibration. We might be getting really negative experience. All of a sudden I have a negative thought, and boom, I might get hit by a car. Who knows? So we're going to explore that for a second. So the law of vibration, we're all just moving particles. And the law of correspondence, our inner world reflects our outer reflects our inner. And And that really says that everything is related, by the way, in the law of attraction. These 3 laws for me helped me tremendously. I'm not going to share so much about my story today because I want to inform here real quick. We're going to go on a journey over the next couple episodes. These 3 laws, when integrated into my belief system, and I say the word integrated, meaning it's a lifelong journey of this over years, where it took me time to understand them and accept them as part of my basis of operation. They have allowed me to truly trust my ability to sit with somebody and have a conversation with them and connect with them and communicate, rather than sit there and just vomit ego on somebody or simply just need to be validated by their experience. So these 3 laws, I think of all things, have been super helpful to me. And that's why I want to share them with you today. So if we can trust the idea that we're vibrational and that our perception is heightened when we're in better emotional states, and our outer world reflects our inner, and then we can understand that we're attracting these experiences, then we can begin to start paying attention and really being curious. And when we get into the state of curiosity, like children, then we lose judgment. Now, we don't lose discernment. That's important. We don't lose our ability to discern. Super crucial, because we're going to talk about discernment today as well. But we have the ability to connect with this experience and surrender into it. And I'm not talking about like the whole like surrender, like I'm on my knees, I just surrender to everything and I have no choice. That's like submission, right? I'm talking about the powerful decision to trust the relationships, to allow yourself to experience life, the ability to allow yourself to be deeply human and to experience the sum total of the spiritual journey just as much as you are the human. Imagine how much you can get done in your business and brand, by the way. You know what I mean? Your ability to trust what's going on, your ability to understand and make decisions through your intuition and to understand, I'm seeing some things out here, pattern recognition, your ability to understand how you can build a marketing plan, a brand that would actually attract the right people to you, your ideal clients, right? So we're going to tackle this in a couple different levels. Let's dive into the good stuff. Spiritual bypassing and toxic positivity. Now, my goal here is not to give my personal judgment whatsoever. So if I sound like it's judgment, it really isn't. I'm literally just providing an observation and what I've observed, right? So again, I'm only speaking from my personal experience, but let's define both of them and then have a little bit of a conversation back and forth about this. And I will play both sides. That's fair. So spiritual bypassing. So spiritual bypassing is a way of hiding behind spirituality or spiritual practice to distance ourselves away from others and ourselves. It's really allowing ourselves to take an idea such as a spiritual practice, like whatever that is, if that's meditation, right? If you're into plant medicine, if you're somebody who just thinks spiritual practice is going out to Burning Man and running around half naked in the desert, totally your jam, that's cool. But it's interesting because we use that experience to kind of separate ourselves from others by almost being better than, or simply what it looks like is many times we'll say, I'm good now. I found this path and I'm on it. And what happens is there's no more communication. We're not having a conversation. Better said, many times these spiritual practices become such a core function of our identity that we can't help but tell everybody about it. It's like, how do you identify a vegan? They'll tell you. How do you identify somebody who's spiritual? They'll tell you. And so that's where it becomes interesting, because what it does is instead of it being something that enriches the experience, it becomes an identity and personality thing where now we're separating ourselves. Because if you haven't had that peak human experience where you've touched the hand of God and you have gone out in the woods and drinking ayahuasca for the 49th time, then clearly you're just not an enlightened human being. Now, I personally have witnessed and observed that there's something interesting that happens with us as human beings where we have this new peak experience and we've learned something. And instead of us spending the time to integrate it and to observe it and to let it be a part of our lives and let it be, we have this thing where we want to go out and tell everybody about it. And more importantly, we want to heal in others what we haven't healed in ourselves. So we might have that one experience and then go out there and tell everybody else how they should live their lives. And that's why people start to end up getting in this place of isolation. For me personally, I didn't meditate or learn how to meditate until I met somebody that I could truly relate with, somebody who had dressed like me, talked like me, and the power of the messenger. And it wasn't where he was saying, I meditated and I was wearing fur out in the woods in a teepee in Arizona. And we were doing ayahuasca. It was literally a conversation around, I took 5 minutes this morning and caught my breath and meditated for a moment. And, I journal a little bit, and it was almost as if it was like a very natural thing in his life. And for me, I was like, okay, that makes sense. How'd you do it? So I think it's important for us to recognize, if you're somebody who has been, spending a lot of time enriching your life through learning new modalities, right? If you're somebody who's going through retreats and doing all these different things, the bigger obligation, in my opinion, is when you become higher aware of things, you now are saddled with the responsibility of actually taming our ego more by not wanting to go out and teach people anything. Because the true nature of any shaman that I've ever met is you would never know they're a shaman. They hold space, and their laugh is amazing. So spiritual bypassing, we'll talk more about that in just a second. The second one is toxic positivity, which many of us may have experienced more so than spiritual bypassing in a mainstream world. And it's the excessive and ineffective overgeneralization of a happy and optimistic state across all situations. It's the process of toxic positivity that results in denial, minimization, and invalidation of the authentic human emotional experience. Think about this for a second. Let's read that one more time. The excessive and ineffective overgeneralization of a happy, optimistic state across all situations, and the process of toxic positivity results in the denial, minimization, and invalidation of the authentic human emotional experience. So I can avoid things in my life if I'm just happy all the time. If it's just love and light and high vibes only, like good vibes only. And what this does is it completely denies a whole spectrum of emotions that we deal with as human beings. Now, in personal experience, and I'm going to share this, very clearly, I witnessed this a ton in my experience in the network marketing world. Now, personal development, I'm not going to say is the cause, but I will say it is a huge instrument of what's used many times as part of this toxic positivity movement. Now, again, I'm very clear that I don't blame any one thing. Everything is an instrument of intention, a vehicle of intention in my world. If I put a piece of paper and a pen in front of any human being at any given time, they could write a beautiful poem or they could write a hate letter. A gun and a bullet in front of somebody, could do anything. It's all about the vehicle of intention, and that's personal responsibility. But let's talk about group dynamics for a second. When you find yourself in an experience where all of a sudden your entire environment, education, and experience is changed, then you are going through what we call the reconstitution of your entire life. Like your belief systems are completely questioned. So when you come into an experience where people are telling you, that all you have to do is think positive thoughts because the law of attraction is always paying attention, almost like the Old Testament version of God, a man in a cloud waiting to smite you with the hand and to bolt you with a bolt of lightning, then what you're doing is you're essentially living a life where you are projecting a persona, a shell of what we truly are. And so all of a sudden you get around these groups. And in the last episode, I talked about the power of our shadow and how our shadow comes about when we separate from these groups and we get fearful of it because we feel so codependent upon groups. And in this situation, it may be a friend group. God forbid you're a part of your family system sometimes can be a part of this too. I've witnessed that where people's families were part of this. And it's almost as if they're indoctrinated to this idea and belief that we don't allow things like guilt, shame, fear, anger to come into this situation. We deny the experience completely. It just doesn't exist. And all in the perception that what I've done is I've organized my life in such a way that when I wake up every single morning, like a robot, I do these same five daily habits that I do every single day. And as long as I do that, everything's going to be okay. And I just think positive thoughts. And I go in the mirror and tell me if you've done this before. And what I do is I grab my 3x5 index card full of affirmations and I'll go in the mirror, even though my rent is past due and even though my car is about to get repossessed and even though I've literally alienated my entire friendships and people that used to know me, but because I've been reading these personal development books, now I'm in this place where I'm like, I am so happy and grateful now that I'm a millionaire in the next 30 days. But you got to say it with feeling. You got to be in the next vibrational state. So now you start to think good thoughts. Maybe you're on the beach. Maybe you're with the person that you love, who now you're alienated from because you decide that you're going to go on this journey as well, but you haven't really had the conversations that allow them to feel a part of the journey and to have a quit point or anything else like that. But you're going to get in that mirror and you're going to tell that person in the mirror what and who you are going to become. But it never comes. Because then guess what happens? You leave there, you go do something, and then you have that negative experience or you have that negative thought. And then next thing you know, the law of attraction is sitting there in the corner of the room, like some predator waiting for you to have a negative thought. The law of attraction is always waiting for you to have that negative thought. Now it's going to proliferate. Oh my God, what's going to happen? Now I'm having another negative thought. I can't stop this. This is crazy. What's going to happen? I wonder what bad things are going to happen to me. It's like Santa Claus listening to see if you've been naughty or not, right? So then I have to get myself back into that positive, optimistic idea. So what do? I can put music on, get into a peak human experience. Maybe I can walk on fire. Now, listen, these things aren't bad. They're great gateways. But what happens is now I'm completely denying the ability to sit in that experience. I am completely stopping myself from allowing to learn and integrate a lesson on a human level, to be able to integrate that experience, that emotion that maybe manifests from an experience that was never processed and integrated. I haven't done the story work like we talked about in the first episode. I haven't sat down and really thought about what my core beliefs are as a human being. I haven't done anything separate from a group or anything else for me because I'm so fearful of being separate from everyone else. But if I can learn new spiritual stuff, if I can learn the next quote that I can quote from John C. Maxwell or from somebody else, then I can tell everybody else what to do. Meanwhile, I'm not doing it for myself and I can heal the thing in other people. So then we find ourselves in that tricky rabbit hole and spiral. And so the challenge here is that when we talk about spiritual bypassing, we talk about the idea of, are you willing to face yourself? And dealing with things like trauma, dealing with things like our experiences are hard. I was sharing earlier today with Megan. She was on the last episode, my business partner and good friend. And I don't share this often because it's part of my life that I've integrated. And I spend a lot of time. I'm a very real person. I like to sit in the shits and have the conversation because that to me is the humanizing part of life. But many people wouldn't know that I struggled with post-traumatic stress and anxiety so bad, diagnosed anxiety so bad that I had ulcers and I could barely eat. You know, when I lost my mom back in 2007, there was no way that I could communicate to the world because what I had to do was then wipe that feeling off my brain to go serve tables and bartend because that's how I supported myself. That was the real experience, right? The world taught me a valuable lesson, which is nobody stops to slow down for you to understand. And so that experience, though, if I only really said to myself, only positive thoughts, it was such a beautiful experience to have that happen to me. If I never really allowed myself to get angry, if I never allowed myself to get self-righteous, if I never allowed myself to feel sorry for myself, self-pity, if I never allowed myself to truly get into the sense of some of the actions that I took during that experience in my shadow to understand what's capable for me, then I would never be able to sit in front of anybody right now and talk about this stuff in such a way that allows me to move my shit out of the way in order to be fully present to witness another human being. And so when we think about this experience, what are we not being honest with ourselves about? Maybe we didn't know what we didn't know. There's a whole concept of, well, now I know, Chris. I had no idea that the law of vibration, correspondence, and attraction even existed. This is amazing. Maybe I didn't know that spiritual bypassing and toxic positivity was a thing. Amazing. Now the thing is like, does it make sense? And do you want to learn more? That's totally your choice. That's where free will comes in. And so if we're being honest with ourselves, it's really cool to do the work, to then, talk to astrologists and to look into things like gene keys and human design and, to maybe go have a plant medicine experience. But everything can be an escape or an arrival. It can be an escape, meaning you don't want to face your shit. And if this thing can just fix me and give me the shortcut, then I'm just going to go do it. If I can just tell you that I'm a life path, whatever, then what I'm doing is I'm giving you the shortcut. And I can be the shortcut too, because my brain now allows me to be lazy. So I can just say, oh, that makes sense. I was this person because that was my Virgo chart or whatever. How many people come to you and say, I'm a Scorpio, deal with it? Well, maybe learn to actually relate to people. Maybe learn how being a Scorpio could be a huge advantage. And why don't you be mindful of that and be accountable to maybe some opportunities for you? Because everything is a choice, right? Because we're dealing with relationships, the voluntary act of engaging in the ability to connect, to dissipate all the things that we think we are and to find out who we truly are, right? So when we start to learn, when we start to become more aware, again, the responsibility increases. And what happens, and I've been guilty of this myself too, so don't let me sit here and preach either. I've been guilty of going to people and saying, you got to go read this book. This is incredible. As opposed to simply just working with it myself and just becoming an example. Because you get excited. You want to share with people. And you also, by the way, we talked about this before. What's in it for me? What's in it for you? What was in it for me was being seen as an authority, finally having some power in my life, finally feeling like I was the answer for some people. And then totally getting my ass kicked in that regard and realizing, nope, that has nothing to do with you. That is your ego, my friend, riding high in the saddle. What I've now found to be true about this whole entire situation is that when you become more aware, I liken it to the ability of teaching a child how to ride a bike. Now, listen, I don't have kids, but I've experienced being a child, right? I can relate to the child. You teach a kid how to ride a bike, right? And you put some training wheels on the bike, and the kid's super pumped. And all you have to do is just make sure that when you take the training wheels off, that this kid is pumping their asses off and that you hold the seat steady so that they can go in a straight path. Now they ride off into the end of the cul-de-sac, whatever it is, maybe traffic. I don't know what kind of parent you are. They go flying down the road. They're pumped. They're super excited. Now, the difference here is that when that kid stops, are you going to run up to that kid and you're going to get really excited with them and never tell them anything? Or are you going to run up to them and be like, listen, I'm the one who held the seat for you? That to me was the lesson in leadership when it comes to this information. Nobody wants to be told what to do. It's about putting people in a position for success and to create a container and space for people to be who they are without telling them that that's what you're doing. I find that the most spiritual and conscious people that I have met aren't people that tell you that they're spiritual or conscious. They're people that you would never associate with quote unquote that type of demographic, but are able to articulate the moment in time in which their worldview came in direct conflict with an experience and it shook them up and they dealt with it and they lived in it and they processed it and they learned from it and they chose differently against all the generational trauma that their experience has been, and now are able to articulate it in a way that is so deeply human. And to be human is to wrap your arms around all the emotional experiences that we have, the entire spectrum, not giving any credence or special preference to anything else. In a world where business and brand is about relationships, people don't want to connect with just a stoic, cold organization anymore. People want to connect with founders, people with principles and ideas. People want to talk to those who have had life experience. They want to know why you do what you do. The millennial generation, right? For a while, it was these millennials, they're lazy. They don't know what they're doing. I worked in a corporate setting in the Fortune 500 space where they literally were talking internally about the millennial problem in the workforce. They're lazy. They want to know why all the time. Of course, we want to know why, because we watched our parents literally just do it for the sake of doing it, and they didn't get what we wanted. So now we look at that and say, yeah, tell us why. Why should I commit my energy, my talent, my time? Because you believe that how you do things is how we should do things? Because you believe that working your ass off for 40 years, which by the way, now doesn't exist, because when I graduated high school in 2004, it was the first time that they couldn't guarantee that we'd have Social Security. It was the first time they couldn't guarantee that you could graduate college and get a good job and be set for life. So it's that excessive questioning why that's not to be challenging. It's not to be overly emotional. It's a rational question. Why? We have to ask these questions. Why? Now we look at Gen Z coming up behind us, and what do they want? Fucking freedom all the time. Freedom to say, do, express whatever they want. That's why TikTok is blowing up. If you want to understand these platforms, you have to understand the human experience. That's the whole point of all this. We have to look at what is true. We have to look at what is there. So what do we do with this? As we bring this to the idea of how can we take this information and apply it in our own lives, right? Because we don't want to leave ourselves in the mess and just sit there with it. Think about this for a second. When you take a look at your relationships, what are you refusing to actually look at? What questions are you refusing to ask? For fear of the reaction, for fear of it shaking everything up. Because we naturally get taught or get conditioned to live in relationships full of codependency in so many ways. A great question to ask here is, if I removed all convenience away from a relationship and all external validation, which is pretty extreme, by the way. I'm not saying all external validation. But if I remove this, what would be left? Do I genuinely enjoy being in a relationship with this person? Do I learn from them? Do we have a shared common joint vision for the future? You can't be friends with a million people, by the way. So in social media world where people are talking about, following counts and everything else, it's fundamentally impossible once you get past a certain number. You're not gonna be able to answer every single DM. So you're actually asking for something you're not even gonna be able to keep up with. And it's gonna put you in a cycle that we're gonna talk about in another episode about the pressures of growth on social media and in marketing. So in our relationships, is there convenience? And if I remove that convenience and validation, what would be left? That's what I call a catalyst for clarity. That catalyst forces us to see things as they are in a very squeaky clean mirror. What about in our businesses? I have met a lot of people who are in that space where, they found spirituality, they found a practice and everything else. And all of a sudden, everything is done. And here's the thing, I only do it if it feels good. I have no problem with that at all in my personal preference. But my thing is that they're dishonoring the principles that build a business and a foundational brand. Maybe it's I feel icky when I sell or marketing, and maybe I don't want to be inauthentic. Maybe I don't want to run ads because I don't want to be one of those people, right? But we're completely dishonoring the principles of building a business. And there are people making money hand over fist who are going out there exploiting that desire by telling you that you can just do it simply through thought alone and just by manifesting things. That if you bring sex into your business, if you're sexier, if you are going to show up and consult your crystals or whatever that is. I've met some incredibly talented people who are able to provide a spiritual advising into a business that I spend good money and time with because they actually provide a grounded understanding of just this one domain connected back and found the connection point between that domain and the business world. Many people don't even know this, but many hedge funds and large organizations actually employ psychics and mediums. Super interesting. But what I'm saying here is that there has to be a grounded understanding of the relationship. You go too far in one direction, you're now pendulum swinging into the world of just abstract. And we're all bought into it. We'll give our money away because all of a sudden we found the mystical, the interesting, something totally new. And if you tell a lie big enough, loud enough, and long enough, then you're going to get attention from people. So in our lives, we have to find discernment in our business and relationships. Discernment is asking these catalysts for clarity questions. In the business part, what am I refusing to see as the principles in my business that will build it? What are the foundational understandings of the skills, the understanding that I have to have? What about building a brand? Some people think that they're just going to think good thoughts, meditate, and their ideal clients are just going to show up. And listen, you might have an experience where somebody shows up, but that is not how to build a business whatsoever. Because business is built upon leveraging and hedging risk. And if you want investors to leverage their money into your business, they're not going to want to build anything with you if you're saying, I just simply sit here, meditate, write some stuff on paper, light it on fire, then blow it into the wind. It's just not going to happen. That's fooling yourself. Now, you don't have to also live in that hyper rational space where all you do is do, right? That's not it either. But we do have to honor the principles of this. And that discernment allows us to tap into that law of correspondence. So within, so without, what am I seeing out here? And then coming into the inner world, using your practices, whether you are a breather, whether you are into Wim Hof, whether you're into whatever your flavor of ice cream is that gets you that point of clarity. And then finally, the next thing I would say is take a look at how you are actually developing yourself as a human being. If you are spending your entire existence digesting content and just listening to audiobooks all day long and reading the next book that people recommend to you with it, instead of asking yourself the question, do I really need this book? Because I have a whole bookshelf full of books next to me right now that I've read, and many of them are exactly the same. And in fact, as I started reading them, I kind of got irritated because I'm like, yeah, a life full of personal development, of life experience that I've sat with and integrated and processed and continue to process through. You're not really telling me anything new. I appreciate the attempt. I know that you're trying to help people. This is amazing. But it's not necessarily something I need, because in today's world, so many of us are literally seeking that next secret, that next thing, which we're all exploited by the way, because the secret triggers the part of our brain that really gets us curious. It gets right into that amygdala responsive emotion of my business. I have no idea what to do, where to go, who to turn to. And next thing you know, you'll go to anybody who has that answer for you. And all they're going to do is they're going to package up some regurgitated form of something else and then try to give it to you and then tell you that you just don't believe enough. You just don't believe enough. And that becomes a really tough feedback loop. So it's about recognizing the patterns in our relationships. What are we not facing? What are we not looking at? Are we willing to ask the question of convenience and validation? Of what do I actually need and want in a relationship? Two very different things. And being honest about the fact that relationships are great. They provide advantages. They're voluntary. But beyond that, what are we doing here? Where are we going? What does this relationship turn into? It's kind of tough when we live our lives on eHarmony or on Tinder, just looking for that next dopamine hit of somebody liking us falsely online because we put 4 pictures out there that we want people to see. Kind of interesting. The next thing is looking at our business, looking at the principles. Like, do you have your marketing in place? Is your brand solid? Do you understand the numbers of your business? Do you have a plan for how you're going to sell your product and develop your product? And when you do you have an ability to resell that product? Business is super simple. Idea to product, product to customer, customer to sales, sales to more sales. That's the loop of business. And then when it comes to our ability to understand ourselves and what we're growing for ourselves, are we continually digesting so much information that is just giving us the same information over and over again, looking for a secret? Or are we able to take the next 30 days and go on a fast and not take in any of that stuff? Unless it's something that's really forcing us to ask some questions and dive deep. And are we willing to allow ourselves to recognize, where am I simply putting a happy face on and then going to other people and telling them they should just be happy and to just smile at everything? I know people are dying from COVID. I know some other things are happening, but you should just be grateful and happy that things are happening. It's all happening for you, not to you, right? That's a really hard place to be when you're in that first phase of the story where you are still seeing things that's happening to you. That's a lack of compassion. And then how many times are we sitting there saying to ourselves that we're just honoring, our spiritual practice and maybe one more plant medicine journey will just get us where we need to go? This is an intense conversation. This is a lot. This is where, we begin to get into the full swing of what we're going to do here with the connection point, which is being able to remove the barriers that allow us to be seen, heard, and felt for everything that we truly are. This is not for the weak of heart, and this is definitely not for the folks who are in this space where they want to get to the point, because the point will never come. You can hear it in conversation. You can experience it in other ways where you listen to a conversation and somebody's just rushing to get to the point. There's a huge difference in life. And I'll say this, depending upon how it hits you, but there's a huge difference in life between making love and just having sex. Two very different experiences. Both are great, by the way. I don't think you should go either one way if you don't want to. It's totally your choice. But if you are going to experience true intimacy, if you want to live a life in which the quality, not the quantity of your interactions and connections are full of depth and satisfaction, and you're going to build a business that you don't absolutely hate and become a martyr to, and then end up in a space where you feel resentful, like so many of us do, and isolated, then it's important for us to take the time right now to get intentional with it and to really think about what these things will turn into. So reflect on this for today. Think about this. Where in our lives are we refusing to see things as they are? And what's the scariest thing about looking them straight in the face and being able to sit with them for a moment and maybe plan? If you're thinking about a few things you can do, listen, I've encouraged people to take, a full weekend away from their family and everybody, away from any influences that they have. Grab an Airbnb with your journal and just go sit with this stuff. Get your favorite bottle of wine. I don't know, whatever you want to do, and go do that. Spend some time with yourself. Hermetic laws came from people who literally sat by themselves digesting this stuff. Don't become so perfect that you become unrelatable, that you're so a finished product, you've been healed and all this other stuff, because there's no such thing in my world as healed. There's only healing. There's a continual process at different levels. Take some time with this. Even if you do after this episode, sit with it, ask them some questions, reach out to us. I would love to hear your thoughts and feelings on this. But I'm going to go ahead. We're going to end it here. And I can't wait to explore this topic further with you. I look forward to the next episode. And as always, I can't wait to see what you build, because the beautiful life that you desire is not a matter of chance. It is a matter of intention. And until next time, I'll see you soon. This has been another episode of The Connection Point. And if you want to support us, then you can do it in the following ways. Leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Like, comment, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. And connect with us on all social channels. And if something moved you in this episode, then join us in the Intentional Collective, a private community where we take the conversation deeper while providing coaching, guidance, and support, all at theintentionalcollective.com. We look forward to seeing you next time. And until then, we believe in you and your mission and can't wait to hear more.